Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Daily Defender. So glad to be with everybody again. My apologies for the length of time in between, the last video and this one. Just a number of things getting in the way, but really appreciate everybody sticking with us. The new subscribers, the new comments, really appreciate it. Great to have some comments going back to some other videos. So appreciate all of that. We did have some comments about maybe, can these videos be like 3 to 5 minutes? And that's really not the type of video that I'm trying to do here. We're trying to impart some historical knowledge, practical information, product scope or, product information, and then some, maybe personal opinions and comparisons. And that's really hard to do in a 3 to 5 minute video. So I think we're going to have to kind of stick with the platform that I've got, but I'll keep them as short as possible. I know people don't want to spend all kinds of time on these, but really appreciate it. Today, I had promised in the last video, when we had some of those SIG videos, that I would get back or wanted to get back to a Smith revolver video. And I think this one is very fitting. This is what we want to talk about today is a Smith & Wesson Model 15 combat masterpiece. And it truly is a masterpiece. It's beautifully made, beautifully engineered, absolutely kind of almost perfect. And I'll talk about that in the deep dive with its balance. Just a beautiful shooting 4-inch Smith in 38 Special. It's just a beautiful firearm, and we'll talk about that in the deep dive. So I'm glad to be with everybody again, and let's go ahead and do that. Let's look into this Smith & Wesson Model 15 in our deep dive.
Right. So as I just introduced, we want to take a deep dive on this just absolutely beautiful Smith & Wesson combat masterpiece, Model 15. It's just a exquisite example, I think, of what Smith & Wesson wanted to be doing with revolvers. And in this 38 Special cartridge, I think this Model 15 is just kind of magical, and that's what we'll talk about today. I guess as usual, we want to get into a little bit of a historical timeline on these. This is a K-frame for Smith & Wesson, so kind of their mid-size frame, as probably most of you guys know. This product actually came out, if you will, for them in the right at the turn of the century. In 1899 or 1900, they introduced the 38 Special as basically the military and police. I think it may have even been like the first model or something like that, as it was termed. That's kind of the start of this particular firearm. And interestingly enough, it goes obviously in that military and police up through World War II. It moves into the post-wars. They tend to kind of call it, came back as the K-38 combat masterpiece. And then, of course, in 1957, as we all know, Smith & Wesson started using model numbers, and it was assigned as the Model 15. It actually ends in 1999 as its platform, and as revolvers kind of did in the 90s. And then in early 2010, 2011, I believe it was brought back in the Classic series, which was fantastic, I think. Unfortunately, then just a few years later, I think it was 13 or 14, they decided to end production again. And I think that is really, really a shame. This is, and I don't know at what point here in the deep dive we talk about it, maybe here, this platform, in my opinion, for 38 Special, not to take anything away from the 357 Magnum revolvers, but of course you can shoot 357 Magnum and 38 Special in those, but just as a dedicated 38 Special cartridge revolver, for me so far, I think this Model 15 in this particular configuration, again, for me, is the Goldilocks kind of scenario. As we walk through and do the deep dive, we can point some of those things out. And as I pick it up and handle it, I'll try to talk through that. But I think it's a real shame that Smith & Wesson decided not to continue with this particular revolver. Again, I know we've got a lot of other revolvers that they've continued with and can still buy, but I was just in a conversation with someone who was thinking about getting a first purchase gun, and not to get too deep into the story, but revolvers came up. He inherited a revolver, was maybe thinking about utilizing it, but it was a 32 Smith & Wesson long, and it was not a Smith or a Colt or a Ruger. It was kind of an off-brand, and the whole platform didn't work. However, the concept of the revolver he thought may really work for him and his family, not being necessarily gun people, and having a six-shot revolver, something as well balanced as this, could really have be or been a solution for him. So at any rate, as a little side note there, that I think these really, really do still have their place, and I think it's just an absolute shame that Smith doesn't make this. Maybe they'll bring it back. Thankfully, they were built for decades and decades and decades, and there's a fair number of them out there. They tend to be a little pricey now, as most of the Smith revolvers are. But at any rate, let's see if we can kind of talk through it. And I guess before we kind of really do the deep dive, I mean, some of the other historical data with the Model 15 is very interesting. The U.S. military, specifically the U.S. Air Force, used a ton of these. This was their basically go-to revolver, as I understand, from about 1960 to 1990. Excuse me. Still fighting off my cough and cold. So they used this 60s, 70s, 80s, and even into the early 90s. And in particular, a very large number of these during the Vietnam War. I think I picked up a note that somewhere around just in the late 60s alone, 5,000 of them were purchased. And you'll see a lot of pictures if you're a historical person and do a little historical type stuff. Then you'll see a lot of Smith & Wesson revolvers. I'm kind of a huge Colonel Robin Olds fan, the F4 Phantom fighter pilot ace from Vietnam. Amazing person and amazing story, but this was his particular firearm, not this gun, but the Model 15 4-inch, as we see it here, with a wood stock, was what he decided to put in his hip holster every time that he climbed into that F4 Phantom. So just a really, really neat historical part to Smith & Wesson, as there are so many historical parts to Smith with this 15. So really cool there. What else do I remember? I think actually in the late 60s, the Naval Special Warfare at that point, it would have been the SEALs in Vietnam, had also looked at this or purchased some or used some, so there's a bit of a connection there. And I also read at some point, I think LAPD, and I think mostly the U.S. Secret Service after the JFK assassination went to the Model 19 357 Magnum, but I did pick up a reference or two that maybe a uniform division of, so to speak, at that point, or not the protection detail, was using the Model 15. So again, really, really interesting. I think this, I can see why this was so popular, but let's just go ahead and take a closer look at it a little bit. This particular version, again, I kind of gave you the chronological from about 1900 all the way to, let's just call it 99 or 2000, that they built this and then built it for a few more years in the Classic Series. This particular one is a Model 15-3, and between that and the serial number, I peg it right around the late 70s. So, a 77, 78, which is kind of, again, one of my favorite eras for these revolvers, the 70s. So I'm very, very, very happy with this. And it was in excellent condition. This is a clear and safe firearm, of course, but it was just in beautiful condition. Again, you've heard me talk about it, and I'll say it again. This just intoxicating midnight blue of the Smith & Wesson revolvers from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, 50s. It's just absolutely gorgeous, and this one was in just amazing condition. It was one of the reasons I decided to pick it up. And I didn't know that much about the Model 15, other than, basics of the K-Series, 38 Special and all of that. But it turned out to be just an amazing, amazing shooter. So just to kind of do a quick walk around, this one is a 4-inch barrel. They came in 2, 4, 6, and I believe an 8-inch. I don't know which one was the most popular or which one they sold the most of. But this is a 4-inch pinned barrel. You can see the pin there, and this was kind of the way that Smith did things with barrels for a long, long time. They stopped this at least on this particular model, in the early 80s. So if you find one of these in the 80s to 90s range, you won't see a pinned barrel. The barrel itself is not a pencil barrel, and it's not a heavy barrel. I'm just considering this, or calling this, a standard. You can see the taper here coming off the K-frame a little bit in the video. You can kind of see how it tapers down. Beautifully done 4-inch barrel, perfect weight and size in my opinion. And I think that's actually one of the things that just sets this particular firearm off so well. This barrel type 4-inch with the K-frame, to me, it's just perfectly balanced. I talked a little bit about the Model 10 and its balance, and it has a different kind of balance to it. It's almost a featherweight balance. The weight of the gun, I don't know how they kind of, the K-frame kind of seems to disappear with the pencil barrel. I don't know how that gun magically does that, but it has a slightly different balance feel. This has a meatier, stouter, complete weight feel. And for me, it just works. It works so well. It almost feels like it's built from one continuous piece of steel. Just an amazing piece of engineering and manufacturing here from Smith on this combat masterpiece. Just gorgeous. So that's our just kind of doing our traditional walk around. That's our 4-inch pin barrel. The pin is really there as kind of your safety net. This is the way that these guns were manufactured back in the day. Kind of walking over the top, we've got the traditional, very nice craftsmanship here along the top. It has a rather interesting sight, if I understand it right. This is the Bowman quick draw front sight. And I think he was an FBI agent, if I remember right. So I don't know what exact influence he had with Smith or how that came along. And of course, the barrel is stamped Smith & Wesson here, roll marked, very nice. And just kind of walking through it. We don't have any kind of full lug. Basically, our ejector rod is being held in place by the smaller component here, or just this portion here. There's no partial or full, lug. It is a 6-shot revolver, 38 special, as we've talked about. There's no reason for a recessed cylinder because this is 38 special and not 357 Magnum. Very, very traditional, workmanship there. It is stamped 15-3 on the frame, so we have that. Again, extremely well done. Traditional thumb release here. All of these would have been obviously forged parts at this stage, at this production level. But just back up to the top again, we've got this Bowman quick draw front sight. You have an adjustable rear sight, so this is a traditional as well with Smith & Wesson. Certain models will have the adjustable rear sight. Others will have just the U-shaped rear trough sight, if you will. If we just kind of turn around and take a look at the rest of the firearm, on this side of the barrel, we have Smith & Wesson 38 special CTG stamped into the barrel. Again, always beautifully done. CTG referring to cartridge. So great calling out 38 special. We have our traditional 4-line stamped information and a beautiful large Smith & Wesson trademark logo. Just so well done on this side. And again, the finish is absolutely gorgeous. This would be a 3-screw particular frame at this era, this time frame, 1, 2, and of course the third screw is almost always concealed by the stocks. These are the traditional and original walnut wood stocks that would have come on this particular firearm. Well done. I'm not always a fan. Again, it seems to, depending on the size of the frame and the balance, this one for me does work very well. Maybe not perfect. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the wood stocks, and I know a lot of people are not. We see so many wood stocks taken off and other grips or stocks put on, or the traditional grip adapters used, which were very, very popular. This one does seem to work very well for me. I can get a very nice high grip, which is always nice and important with a revolver. Serrated trigger here. We do not have a smooth trigger. We do have a serrated trigger. You've got serrations, vertical serrations on the front of the strap, serial number stamped into the base, and then again rear vertical serrations here. All very well done. Again, the finish is excellent. The hammer itself, again, forged with the hammer nose, so we're still obviously doing that. I don't remember what year they moved away from the hammer nose into the flat hammer and the MIM parts. Certainly the classic series revolvers of that 2000 to 2013 or 2014 range would have all the MIM parts and no trigger nose. So just beautifully done, just a gorgeous firearm. We said 6-shot, 38 special K-frame. I think we've got all the basics down. Really, that's the crux of this firearm. I really wanted to impart not only just how pretty it is and well made and engineered it was, but just an absolute pleasure to shoot. The double action with almost all Smith & Wesson revolvers, unless there's something wrong with them, or maybe you get into some of the classic series, there's some complaining about those, although I don't think they're that far off. It's just a heavy but extremely smooth and balanced. It's actually relatively short, right? Just a beautiful, beautiful double action trigger. In fact, it's probably one of the nicest double action triggers I have on my Smith & Wesson revolvers. This 15 was just a joy to shoot. And then single action, of course, is going to be very glass-like almost and quick break. So it was just an absolute pleasure to shoot. And I think that's really what, not only to show you guys the gun and give you guys a little bit of historical reference in terms of a little bit of its production life and where it was used, and this huge connection to the U.S. Air Force and probably a lot of police departments as well. But just for me, what turned out to be, I think it's my favorite 38 special Smith & Wesson revolver. The combat masterpiece. I love the name, and it absolutely totally fits this firearm. It's truly just a masterpiece. I think if you're getting into Smith & Wesson revolvers or want to look at a revolver, I think this model 15 4-inch, again, there's always preferences. They didn't make a 3-inch as I understand. 2-inch would be a snub. 6-inch gets obviously longer, 8-inch considerably longer. But I think this particular barrel 4-inch K-frame setup, shooting Smith & 38 special anyways, a lot of my 357 Magnum revolvers, and I think a lot of people with their 357 Magnum revolvers generally shoot 38 special. Yeah, we'll shoot 357 Magnum in them occasionally, or a half a box or a box, but when I go to the range, I don't shoot boxes and boxes of 357 Magnum. It's primarily 38 special. And so if you're going to kind of do that anyways, and maybe you don't need the versatility of 357 Magnum and 38 special, maybe 38 special is all you're really looking for, and still in current defensive cartridges, still a good, decent self-defense round. So this was just a beautiful gun to shoot. I cannot say enough about it. I think if you're looking for like I just started to say, if you're looking at a 38 special Smith & Wesson revolver, that kind of cartridge, and maybe the snub's a little too short, I think looking for a 15 4-inch that's in good shape, check your trigger, check your lockup and all that. But I think this is just, you really cannot go wrong with this particular firearm, especially for target shooting. But again, going back to that other small analogy or story of my friend who was thinking about, getting into firearms, or maybe getting a firearm, at least getting one firearm in the house to have some kind of defensive capability for him and his family, but not being a gun person. I think, again, the revolvers kind of come back in. That's why they never really truly go away. I think they continuously to creep back into our, spectrum of, hey, maybe, wait a minute, this can still be a very viable defensive firearm for yourself and your family, especially as a home defense gun. So I hope you guys liked the video. Again, just wanted to impart some more knowledge and get another great Smith & Wesson revolver video out to you guys. Thank you again, and we'll see you again very, very soon on the Daily Defender.